She said she wanted kindness, but her eyes flinched when you gave it. You noticed, didn't you? The way her body recoiled from your warmth like it was a threat wrapped in silk. There was a moment just once when you caught her smiling at the man who ignored her, a smile different from the one she gave you, sharper, hungrier. You buried it, but it stayed, like a splinter beneath your skin. No one told you that your gentleness would be punished. No one warned you that beneath her words lived another language, the one spoken in childhood shadows and unfinished dreams. You thought love would be returned. You thought your goodness would be a mirror, but it was a mirror only to your need. And now you stand here, not knowing why your touch was feared, why your gifts were refused, why your loyalty made her run. You think it's your fault, or hers, but it was never between you. It was before you, something older, darker, still whispering through her blood and yours. You were never just a man to her, you were a reenactment. You gave her gentleness like a confession, expecting her to cradle it, to bless it with the warmth you never received. But she paused only for a breath, and in that pause lived 1,000 silent rejections. You didn't see it at first. Her lips moved as if flattered, but her pupils narrowed, her shoulders turned in. Her breath stalled. You mistook that tension for shyness. It wasn't. It was recognition. She saw something in your kindness that made her skin itch, something familiar, something she learned long ago to distrust. You were too available, too legible. You didn't know that the unconscious doesn't crave peace, it reenacts pain. She didn't want your safety, she wanted the shadow, the unfinished drama. You were never the man who hurt her, but you reminded her of the one who tried to protect her after the hurt, the one who failed, and the failure smelled like you. Your hands trembled when you touched her shoulder, not with lust, but with longing. She felt the tremor. She mistook it for weakness. But it wasn't weakness. It was hunger disguised as purity. You became her mirror, not her escape. And mirrors are dangerous things when you've spent a lifetime avoiding your own reflection. Your words were soft, but behind them lived 1,000 unanswered questions. Will she stay? Will she choose you? Will she finally prove you worthy? You called it love, but she heard the plead beneath the praise. And nothing is more suffocating than a man who adores her in exchange for salvation. She needed freedom, and your gaze felt like a cage lined with roses. You thought your affection would protect her, but it made her responsible for your happiness. You thought loyalty would make you irresistible, but it made you predictable. The more you gave, the more she disappeared. Not because she wanted cruelty, but because she feared what your kindness required. It asked her to become someone she couldn't be, someone healed, someone gentle, someone ready. But the girl inside her still loved the chase, still needed the silence, still believed punishment was proof of love. She didn't punish your kindness because it was wrong. She punished it because it threatened the architecture of her pain. Your goodness endangered her identity. She was not ready to be seen without her mask, and your gaze pierced it. So she punished the part of you that dared to look beyond her performance. She punished the man who didn't play the game. You smiled when she cried. You listened without trying to fix. You held the door and remembered the little things. But all she saw was a man who did not burn, a man who would not become the fire. And something ancient inside her whispered, "If he does not consume me, he cannot protect me." It was never logical. It was primal. Reptilian, buried. She needed to feel small in his presence. She needed to feel wanted by a god, not needed by a boy. You offered safety, and she felt bored. You offered stability, and she felt trapped. Because the safety you offered was soaked in desperation. The stability you brought was not hers. It was borrowed from your fear of being alone, and fear, no matter how gentle, always stinks. You called her queen, but you asked her to rescue you. You dressed it in chivalry, but beneath the armor was a boy abandoned too long. She did not want to be your answer. She wanted to be a question. She wanted to be pursued, not pedestalized. You held her too carefully, like something that might shatter, and so she shattered on purpose, just to break free. You didn't understand that some women punish what they cannot understand, and what she could not understand was how your kindness carried such hunger. You were kind not because you had enough, but because you had nothing else. Your smile was a veil, your patience a strategy, your love a transaction dressed in poetry, and she sensed it all. Not consciously, but somewhere between memory and myth, somewhere in the space where her father's silence still echoes and her mother's tears still stain the sheets. She met you there, and she ran. You watched her drift. You tightened your grip. You thought if you gave more, she would stay. But giving was never the issue. The issue was the silent contract your gifts carried. If I love you well enough, you will never leave me. That is not kindness. That is fear wearing perfume. That is manipulation in a velvet glove. And she saw it, even if she didn't have the words. She smiled at the man who ignored her because his indifference confirmed what she already believed, that love must be earned, that desire must be chased. He did not offer his soul. He made her work, and in that work, she felt alive. She felt like a girl again, reaching for the father who never turned around. You turned too easily. You stayed too long. You didn't make her bleed, and that, to her, felt false. She didn't trust a love that didn't hurt. You called her confusing, but she was only responding to the language her body still spoke trauma. She punished your kindness because her nervous system still equated safety with boredom and intensity with love. You said, "I'm not like the others," but she didn't want not like the others. She wanted the one who made her feel like she was dying and being reborn, over and over again. You made her feel calm, and calm reminded her of silence, and silence reminded her of being unseen. She didn't want peace. She wanted resurrection, and you were a lullaby, not a battle cry. Your love did not challenge her demons. It asked them to sit down and have tea. She needed a man who could enter the fire with her, not one who stood at the edge and offered water. You never entered the fire. You feared it, because in truth, it was never her you wanted to save. It was yourself, through her. That is why she punished you, because she saw your longing dressed up as love, because she saw your wounds hidden behind your smile, and because on some level, you reminded her of the parts of herself she worked so hard to bury. You were too soft, too familiar, too naked. And nakedness terrifies those who are still wearing borrowed skin. You think she was cruel, but she was only protecting the wound, and you unknowingly tried to touch it with hands still shaking from your own. You both played roles. You, the savior, her, the flame, and in the end, you burned yourself trying to rescue a woman who never asked to be saved. You thought love would be enough, but love, when mixed with fear, becomes poison, and she tasted it in your kiss. Not the poison of harm, the poison of expectation. You wanted her to heal you by loving you back, and she could not carry that weight. So she dropped you, not because you weren't good, but because you were too good in the way that revealed the lie she still needed. And no one forgives the one who threatens their illusion. She left, and you called it a loss. But perhaps it was a mirror breaking in your hands, the mirror you held up to her hoping she'd see love. And instead, she saw herself bleeding. That's not your fault, but it was your fate. And now you stand, hands full of glass, still wondering why she ran. You thought she was leaving you, but she was leaving someone older, someone whose voice she carries in the marrow of her bones. She looked at you and didn't see a man. She saw a pattern, a shadow, a memory wearing your face. Her smile was never for you. It was for the child she once was, still aching for the mother who kissed her forehead without meaning it. You were not a lover. You were the return of something unfinished. She punished you not because you failed, but because you reminded her of the day she first understood love was a trap disguised as comfort. You wanted to be chosen, but she never learned how to choose. Her hands were trained to reach for absence. Her eyes learned to read silence as affection. You offered presence, and it felt like an invasion. You came too close, and her defenses mistook it for danger. The kindness you gave, the quiet, attentive, open kind, reminded her of promises that once turned into disappearances, and disappearances that never apologized. So she struck first, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. You think she chose the wrong man over you, but she wasn't choosing. She was obeying an invisible script, one written by a child sitting at the top of a staircase, listening to her mother cry behind a locked door. One repeated in every mirror she's ever looked into, one that told her if it doesn't hurt, it isn't real. If he doesn't leave, you must, Woody. You were too still, too sincere, and sincerity, to her, has always ended in abandonment. She never learned to recognize kindness without suspicion, because kindness was often followed by withdrawal, love, followed by manipulation. Her body remembers the sequence: smile, lean in, feel safe, then fall, then silence, then gone. You repeated the first half of the pattern. She didn't wait for the rest. Her nervous system screamed, run, and she did. You called it rejection. She called it staying alive. You weren't rejected. You were miscast. She needed a phantom to chase, not a mirror to face. And you, unknowingly, foolishly became the mirror. You gave her your vulnerability like it was a gift, but it was really a question: will you hold me? And she couldn't, not because she didn't care, but because she's still learning how to hold herself. Every man who needed her love more than she needed theirs, she left, not to punish them, but to stop herself from collapsing. She's been the caretaker before. She's played mother to grown boys who cried into her chest but disappeared when she needed something real. So when you offered your soul, when you asked her to read between your silences, to love you because you were gentle, she heard the echo of every man who left their wounds in her lap and called it love. She didn't want another son. She wanted a man who needed nothing, or at least seemed to. You think women want depth? But you showed her your depths before she even asked for your surface. You drowned her in you, and she was still learning how to breathe. She wanted flirtation. You gave her trauma. She wanted the dance. You gave her the wound. You thought honesty would free her, but honesty, without timing, becomes a weight. She was never ready to carry the truth you begged her to see. She couldn't be your healer. She couldn't be your redemption. She couldn't answer the ache that's lived in your chest since you first realized your mother was disappointed in you. You tried to be different. You tried to be the man who listens, who stays, who doesn't break things. But she wasn't measuring you by what you did. She was reading you through what you felt like, and you felt like a demand. Soft, wordless, heavy. There was a moment so brief you almost missed it when she looked at you with something close to compassion. Not love, not lust, something maternal. That was the end. Because once a woman feels she has to mother you, she cannot desire you, not in the way you needed. You collapsed into her gaze before she knew what you carried. You asked her to be your witness, but no one taught her how to hold pain without making it hers. You didn't see it, but she was already tired when she met you. Tired of being understood by men who only wanted to be saved. Tired of carrying other people's clarity while her own world remained unclear. You gave her tenderness, but it came with a request: love me as I am. because no one else has. She heard it, she just didn't answer, because she's heard it too many times, and somewhere deep inside, you knew that the more you gave, the more she vanished, that your softness was not a balm, but a burden, that you were asking her to touch the wound without cutting her own hand. She walked away not because you were wrong, but because you were too right, too early. You offered her everything, and everything is a lot to hold when your hands are still shaking from before. You believed your love was pure, but even purity can be manipulative. Even gentleness can hide a contract. You wanted her to need you not in lust, but in longing. You wanted to be irreplaceable, not by force, but by being the only man who truly saw her. But being seen is terrifying when you've built your identity around disappearing. She couldn't love you because loving you would mean unlearning what love has always meant. And that is not something most people do in time. She looked at you and felt an invitation. But the cost of acceptance was too high. To love you would mean questioning everything, and not everyone is ready to question everything. Not when survival depends on repetition. So she returned to the one who doesn't ask, the one who doesn't offer explanations, the one who doesn't peer too deeply. You hated him for it, but she loved him for what he didn't demand. He let her stay in the lie. And sometimes, the lie is warmer than the truth. At least, at first, you believed her rejections were about you, but they were about the mother she still carries inside, the one who taught her that love is negotiation, that men are either too much or too absent, that giving in means being broken, that safety is a prelude to loss. You became the embodiment of that lesson, not by intention, but by function. You offered yourself as proof that not all men are the same, but her body doesn't believe in proof. It believes in pattern, and the pattern told her he's too close, he's too soft, he's too open. Run, because something that open must be hiding something darker, and she didn't have the strength to find out what. She saw the boy in your eyes, the one who wasn't picked, the one who tried to earn love by being good, and it shattered her because she knew that boy. She's been that child, and if she stayed, she'd have to face it, and if she faced it, she might never stop crying. So she left, and you stayed, still asking the question, what did I do wrong? But the question was never about doing, it was always about being. And you, in all your quiet, aching honesty, reminded her of who she never got to be, and that was too much. You called it love, but it was architecture. Every gesture, every pause, every compliment placed with precision like bricks in a house no one asked you to build. You thought if you built it beautiful enough, safe enough, soft enough, she would walk in and stay. You mistook construction for connection. You mistook your control for care. You mistook her silence for comfort. But she saw the walls, even when you painted them with poetry. She felt the lock, even when the key was made of gold. You dressed yourself in kindness because power frightened you. You spoke in quiet tones, not because you had nothing to scream, but because you were terrified she'd hear it and run. And yet, she ran anyway, because a cage lined with velvet is still a cage. You offered your soul with trembling hands, but what you held behind your back was more dangerous, your need to be chosen. That need shaped everything. It seeped into your posture, your rhythm, the way you timed your messages. You offered gifts that looked like love, but they were tests. Would she notice? Would she thank you? Would she stay? You didn't say these things aloud, but she felt them anyway. The unconscious speaks louder than words, and hers heard yours before you opened your mouth. You tried to protect her from harm, but not because she was fragile, because you were You needed to be the one who never hurt her. You needed to be the one who was different, the good one, the kind one. But no one asked you to carry that burden. You chose it, and by choosing it, you began to suffocate under its weight. You asked to be seen for what you gave, but what you gave came with invisible strings. You taught yourself to anticipate needs before they were spoken. That was your survival strategy. You wanted to be irreplaceable by becoming invisible, always there. Never disruptive, always pleasant, never heavy. But that invisibility turned you into a ghost. She couldn't feel you. She could only feel the echo of your fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of being average, the fear of being alone. And in that fear, you created the very outcome you dreaded. She didn't leave because you were too much. She left because you weren't enough of yourself. You became a version of you that you thought she'd want, and that version had no gravity, no center, no defiance, no shadow. You gave her the sun, but hid the eclipse. You gave her light, but concealed the source. And so she drifted toward men who burned. Not because they were better, but because at least they were real. You hoped your loyalty would be rewarded, that your predictability would be a comfort. But it became a sentence. She wanted risk, not recklessness, but risk the kind that makes you feel alive, and you made her feel safe. But safety without mystery feels like sleep. You became the lullaby, and she needed thunder. You couldn't see it, but every time you swallowed your opinion to avoid conflict, she lost respect. Every time you apologized before you even sinned, she felt the lie. You thought love meant avoiding rupture, but rupture is real, and without it, there is no repair. You feared your fire would burn her, so you smothered it. But she didn't want ashes. She wanted heat. You created a persona, the good man, empathetic, present, gentle, but inside, you resented that persona. It didn't protect you. It didn't win her. It didn't get chosen. And so you began to seethe, not outwardly, but inwardly, a quiet disgust building in the corners of your smile. You called it confusion. It was rage, the rage of a man who gave everything and remained unseen. And what you couldn't see is that your cage was never built for her. It was built for the little boy who learned that being himself meant being ignored. So he became what they wanted, what they praised, and he carried that mask into manhood, believing it would be enough. But women are not fooled by performance, at least, not forever. They feel the falseness, even when they can't name it. They turn away, not because they hate you, but because something in you reminds them of the parts of themselves they are still trying to kill. You were too soft, not in texture, but in spine. She wanted to lean on you, but your frame collapsed under the weight of your own pleasing. You never told her no. You never said what you really wanted. You never risked being disliked. And without those edges, your love became water in cupped hands touching, but never holding. You hid your desire behind duty. You buried your instincts beneath politeness. You wanted to be the safe harbor, but you became the quiet shore she forgot how to reach. You smiled through the hunger. You nodded through the ache. And in doing so, you taught her to overlook you, because you were already overlooking yourself. You thought kindness would earn you intimacy, but intimacy does not come from offerings. It comes from exposure. And you never exposed the parts of you that trembled, that feared, that wanted without earning. You showed her your control, not your chaos. And so she left, not for someone better, but for someone unapologetic. You asked to be loved for who you are. But who you are is still hidden behind layers of adaptation. And no woman can fall in love with a mask that doesn't crack. She saw through it, not with her mind, but with her body. Her body flinched when you entered the room, not because you were bad, but because you were asking without asking. And the body knows the weight of unspoken debt. You wanted to be irreplaceable, But what you became was interchangeable, another man offering comfort in place of depth. She didn't reject your love. She rejected its terms, because your love said, I will give everything, but you must stay, and freedom cannot live in that house, even if it's painted with kindness, even if it smells like roses. You waited, you hoped, you believed, and when she didn't choose you, you crumbled. But what crumbled wasn't love. It was your identity, the identity of the man who thought he was different, who thought he had solved the riddle of love, who thought his purity was his passport to devotion. But devotion is not earned through safety, it is forged in fire, and you never let her see yours. Now, you walk alone, carrying the ghost of what could have been. You still rehearse the moments, still wonder if you were too soft, too much, too late. But the truth is simpler, colder, more cruel. You built a cage and called it love. You placed your soul in it and waited for her to walk in. But she wasn't looking for shelter. She was looking for someone who could stand in the storm, not someone who hid from it. You didn't lose her, you never had her, because she never saw you, because you never showed her, not the real you, not the you beneath the offering, not the one who doesn't beg to be chosen, but who chooses himself. Somewhere, the house you built still stands quiet, clean, waiting. The door is ajar, the table set, but no one comes, not because they can't see it, but because it casts no shadow, and a house without shadow invites no myth. You sit beside the window now, watching her silhouette disappear into the horizon, not once looking back. In your hand, a rose you never gave her, still blooming, still bleeding, and for the first time, you don't offer it. You let it rot, petal by petal, because only in the rot does the scent become truth, and only in truth does the mask finally fall. Now there is silence, not peace, not pain, just silence. And in that silence, something speaks your name, but it is not her voice. It is your own. The one you buried, the one she could never reach, the one that doesn't need to be loved to exist.